looking forward, think about the amount of air capacity we have in this region in terms of airports. And almost, I think I'll say almost, just to make certain I have it, I have wiggle room, all of the county airports are losing money. We have Hopkins making money, Akron Canton making a little money. They need reliever airports, but do we need this many of them? We've got Lost Nations sitting pretty much by Cuyahoga County Airport. You've got Lorain County Airport sitting there with some wonderful facilities. And then we've got Burke sitting right here. I mean, what really is the capacity? Right now, the FAA has handcuffs on us so that we can't get rid of any capacity. But maybe if we go in as a region and say, this really is an optimized set of airports, and we've got two huge reliever airports grossly underutilized, one in Mansfield, one in Youngstown. By defining the system as being just two airports rather than this region, we're costing us all one whole hell of a lot of money.
And we're doing a lot of lobbying to preserve the phenomenal capacity of the Youngstown Airport through the BRAC process, as opposed to saying, as Ned said, what's the system?
Right.
And what's our system of ports? And how do we integrate our ports and our rail and our roads?
The multimodal issue is huge.
Yeah, the logistics, the competitive advantage of this region logistically is a direct result of the strength of our region in the last century industrially. We've got roads like Route 11 connecting Ashtabula with the Ohio River, which is totally underutilized. That crosses over every rail line and every east-west freeway. And you sort of say, why are we debating over what the future of the Cleveland port is when we have a network of ports, but we don't see it that way? Part of what I think will happen is we change our mental map. And this is a consistent issue. Open up the Cleveland Plain Dealer, Northeast Ohio fails repeatedly to have East Ohio in it. I never put the Mahoning Valley in East Ohio.
Well, that's suburban Pittsburgh.
Well, it's also, but that's whatever. Elvis Spencer comes here to represent Ashtabula and say, excuse me, we're part of you. We're part of you. We don't recognize in our own discussions the strength of a 4 million person region. Even assessing our assets and connecting and leveraging our assets and creating, as Ned said, an ongoing forum so that those issues that can be best dealt with at that scale or dealt with at that scale, those can be dealt with the MPO scale, the county scale, the municipal scale, but we can't deal and we can't compete on the regional scale.
I've got one pointed question, and then I want to open it up to questions from all of you. But at the end of the day, once 36 months of work is complete and some organization that presumably, or forum, is sustainable and will continue, what will happen with traditional planning, say take a Nagel Road interchange in Avon, or the Interbelt Bridge, or the construction of the 271 Route 8 interchange? How will that process be different than it is now?
Well, these are long-term plans. The decisions on the Avon interchange are decisions that were actually made about 40 years ago.
How?
In the original layout of the freeway system. Setting up a set of dynamics that makes it almost inevitable. What we're looking at in a planning process like this has very near-term consequences in terms of perhaps being a forum for dealing with air service, or how the heck we're going to collaborate on and learn from each other on dealing with the stormwater issues. Those are things you can deal with today. Or vacant land, what can Cleveland learn from Youngstown and vice versa? But some of the investments that need to be made, we need to have the plans starting now. The health line that Joe so wonderfully completed was on the boards when I walked into the planning department in 1980 from the 1960s. These are 40-year decisions. Now we've pretty much run the gamut of the freeway-oriented development patterns laid out in the National Defense Highway Act. And the question becomes not how are we going to continue building the city in the region of the 20th century, but how are we going to build a competitive region for the 21st century? That's why the time frame of this is 2050. I will be 102. I will retire.
And Hunter at 102 will be held strictly accountable for everything that happens.
That's right. Norm and I are still in that race. But the reality is my daughter is graduated from college this year. 40 years from now will be 2050. She'll be my age. She'll be our age. What's this place going to be? And these are some of the bigger, longer-term questions that are being asked in other parts of the world and other parts of this country. And this, I think, will allow us to put in place those mechanisms that will enable us to do the next health line. And it may take 30 years, Joe. But it's going to be 30 years from now.
Yeah, you'll be retired by then.
It'll be 30 years from now anyway.
So you didn't answer my question, but it was really eloquent anyway.
Dan, let me try for 3 outcomes coming out of this.
Can you cut it down to 2?
No, well, never. I'll make it 3 A and B. The first outcome is a notion about what the future structure of the region is going to be, those structural decisions of the 40-year decisions. The second part that is going to come out of here will be hopefully will be a policy agenda that will make that structure stick. The third thing it will not address, and that is the fiscal zoning and the fiscal demands on local government that it's at the heart of those incremental small decisions. We can't deal with that. I mean, right now, the feds and the state have not been looking at an integrated fiscal system that includes localities. Instead, we've got a cram down at work. The feds want to have a budget problem, they're cramming it down to the states. States have a budget problem, they're cramming it down to the counties. Counties cramming it down to locals. And that's what's driving an awful lot of the tactical decisions right now. So we have to stay with structure and policy.
Okay, so Avon wouldn't have to submit for approval their plan for a new interchange.
No.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Those are decisions like the Avon decisions made at the MPO level.
But by this point,
but how
the
do we
MPOs would have your policy, the sustainable communities, the broad regional policy agenda in mind, and there'd be buy-in, kumbaya.
But we might start working on how do we get public transportation services to 271 from all compass points.
Jason, you got something to add?
I think, there's a couple outcomes that I would like to see come out of this. And I think one has to do kind of what I mentioned before about I hope that it changes. And I don't think at the end of 3 years we're going to cut the ribbon and say we have a plan, this is done. I really think like what Ned said is important, that this is, I think, starting a process of us collaborating, that hopefully this can kind of put the training wheels might be able to come off at the end of the 3 years and we go forward. But I think a big part of it is getting sustainability into the culture of our planning. And I think a lot of the way that things evolved in the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s in the region were, and this is natural, and I'm not pointing fingers about it, it happened all over the country, but growth was good. It didn't matter where it was, how it was, and I think I'm not prepared to say that caused our economic problems. That could be a symptom, actually, of our economic problems. But I think that idea of just building new things and not really thinking about the relationships between them. And I think where we could have a great opportunity and where we should avoid a big mistake is I don't think the effort should be geared so much about where things are built. I mean, where things are built is important. It certainly shouldn't be ignored. But I think how they're built is even much more important. When a major development is proposed, how it actually fits in with its surroundings. And I think that's starting to be in the zeitgeist, if you will. You look at something like Crocker Park. It didn't exist 20 years ago. With my planner hat on, is it perfect? No. But it is a heck of a lot better, I think, than our old model of just doing an enclosed mall. And I think if we can move toward that type of development, but better connect it to its surroundings, think more about mixed use and density. And I think, like Ned said, we're not gonna impose a Manhattan style model of development, but I think there are opportunities for what Hunter was saying about we started in this region as clusters of towns. And I mean, one of our big planning challenges at our MPO is a community like Streetsboro or Greene And they'll come to our agency now and say, we want to create a town center. There's been all this development. There isn't, what people would think of as a traditional town center. And it is very difficult to create one once things have been developed in a way that makes that difficult. So I think as new areas are developed, looking at more of a community model versus just, because you can see it in the terminology we use. People know the difference between a subdivision and a neighborhood. There's something, I think, intangible that one implies it's more connected together and the other one is a little more disjointed. And I think we need to focus on those connections.
Okay, who's got questions? Andrew Watterson. The chair recognizes Andrew Watterson.
My question is, what strategies do you envision balancing the desire for smaller communities in rural areas to continue growth with one of the requirements of the grant to reduce vehicle miles traveled? And kind of looking at that, are there thoughts around the NPOs to expand their authority beyond just transportation?
Could everybody hear that? Okay. Hunter.
The man with a plan, huh? Well, the vehicle miles traveled is largely a function, I believe, of the dispersal of jobs and the distance between workplace and job base. That's taken place over about a 50-year period. That's not going to change quickly, but the one way you can get at the vehicle miles traveled issue is by providing options and alternatives. And again, that may address, we may come together as a region and say, excuse me, notwithstanding Ohio's policies towards public transportation, we need help up here and we need to try to change some of the laws and the funding streams for transit. A big challenge in this fiscal environment. But enabling that to take place. Simple things might have an incremental impact on that as well. As Jason said, it's not so much what you do, but how you do it and where you do it. If you can't get to the job at 271 at Harvard because the hospital that's being built is a half a block away from the street and the bus line doesn't go to it, then that's not really a practical option in February. But if the hospital that's been built is got the capacity to take a bus line that Joe can run, you might actually be able to live in Kinsman and get to a job in 271. Now that's a decision that we might encourage and might help enable through essentially a toolkit of best practices on how to design transit-friendly buildings and have conversations with the developers that are doing the major work in the 271 area and the communities and the transit agencies to see if we can make that happen. Because the disconnect occurs in very, very specific ways. The longer term, I think it takes the VMT question really comes down to the pocketbook issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, VMT is a wonderful academic concept and one that air quality people are concerned with because it translates to air pollution. But VMT also means dollars out the door at the gas pump every week. And if you don't have options, and other communities that are denser like Chicago have looked at transit-friendly or transit-enabled mortgages as ways of rewarding people who don't have two cars. I don't know all the answers, but I do know that that one of the key variables on the VMT question is how much does it cost the household, and how can we give people better household choices so they don't have to have two cars to get to work because the jobs are closer to the transit's closer to the jobs, and those are real options.